Good morning, everybody, and welcome to Conversations with the Soul. I'm Rita Hickman, and I'm a body-mind expert and owner of Inspire Massage in Northern Illinois. So I'm in the Chicagoland area. Hi, Kathy. How nice to see you today. I'm glad you're joining us. So today's topic is, and I'll be working on it for the next couple weeks, it's about the body-mind connection and dealing with our emotions, understanding the physical component behind how we feel. And because how we feel tends to determine how we interact with the world, the choices that we make. If we're scared of something, or if we're happy about something, or angry about something, it tends to shape our choices. And so because of that, when we start to understand what's underneath how we feel, what contributes to it or drives it, then we get we get a much better control. We get much better influence over how we feel. So let me start out with the title. The title was about people's mother-in-law. And this came about is because yesterday I had a root canal. And as tends to happen when I'm working with people and they find out about what I do, then they have all sorts of relationship questions and all sorts of ways, questions about how to get along with their spouse, their mother-in-law, things along those lines. So I was getting a root canal, and as I'm laying there back in the chair, my dentist is asking me, well, do you have any good advice for mothers-in-law? And I said, absolutely I do. And that started today's topic. So, and then this last night, I got a message, because I told people, I said, well, we're going to be working on this topic today, mothers-in-law, and how to manage that. And they asked me a question. They said, I'm a mother-in-law, and I've got two sons. What's the big deal with mother-in-laws? So I've gotten along with mine for the last 25 years, but really well. She's a really lovely, lovely lady. And so I've never had problems with that, but I've worked with a lot of people who have, and I also understand anxiety at its core, at its depth. I understand where anxiety comes from and what we can do about it. And so she asked, what's the deal with mother-in-laws? And I think mother-in-laws hold a place of a little bit of intimidation. And so when we bring those feelings, our feelings, into that relationship, it can cause a rocky road. And so a mother-in-law can be a really good metaphor for your boss, anyone in a position of authority, anyone who triggers you to feel a little bit of anxiety. So for me, when I was a kid, I had a lot of anxiety, and I knew part of the reason why. Part of the reason was, mental and emotional. What's going on? What am I scared of? What's my family life like? I'm a kid, how am I wired? But there was so many other things contributing to that sense of anxiety that even when my life got on a really great path, I still had all of these symptoms. I still had all the symptoms that I associated with anxiety. So I had knots in my stomach. I couldn't eat. I'd get nauseous easily. My digestion was completely off. My skin would crawl. I'd want to hide. I'd react quickly as if I was a rabbit, in a corner. Sounds startled me. Bright lights, lots of people, they all startled me. And so even though when I got to be an adult and I could rationalize there's no reason for me to be anxious about those things, I was still anxious. And so I had to really track down what was going on. Good morning, Sue. I'm so glad you're here with me today. And I'll see you later today, too. So anxiety for me started to come down to, why do I have this pit and, why do I have this tension in my abdominal area? And it started looking at chakras. That's one of the first paths I took. So the abdominal area in the chakra system is your solar plexus area, and it's about control and comfort and self-confidence. And so I said, okay, when I'm identifying that anxiety is in my solar plexus area, when that's tight, when that's upset, that tells me in my mind that I'm anxious. The neat thing about the mind is that it likes to problem solve things. It likes to find out why something is happening, and it comes up with all sorts of reasons, whether they're accurate or not. It just wants to give us a cause for what we're experiencing. So every time I felt tension or nausea in my solar plexus area, I said, wow, that must be anxiety. Because my mind would say, well, what could it be? You must be nervous about the world. You must be. I remember trying to track down why I felt so nervous, why I felt so tight in that area. And I said, well, maybe it's my job. Maybe it's everybody that I'm working with is making me feel anxious. Maybe I'm worried about the future. Maybe I'm worried about the unknown. And it was a fantasy land. It was a black hole of trying to figure out why do I feel, these feelings. And so you go to counselors and, you talk to your friends and you soul search and you meditate on it. Why am I anxious? Why am I anxious? And you can never really come up with the reason. So I started looking at other causes of my anxiety instead of mental or emotional. And I thought, well, maybe the situations in my life, the mental and emotional issues are just the tipping point. Maybe they're just the thing that pushes me over the edge to feel anxiety. But there must be a lot more going on. What could be going on? So that got me down the rabbit hole of digestive health. And the other day we talked about water, and we talked about the importance of water for digestive health. One of the tips I learned is drinking water before bed, as well as about a half hour before you eat something. And that will help your digestion considerably, because your stomach can't work. You can't do what it needs to be done unless it has enough fluid in there to do it. And so when I first started to drink more water, I noticed my typical traditional morning anxiety went way down. That was step number one. I was like, wow, you mean drinking water is making me feel less anxious? What's up with that? And it got me on that path of finding out the body-mind causes of anxiety, the physical reasons why we feel anxious. So it started with the water, and then it went to fiber. Because I had always felt anxious, it meant that I couldn't eat. It meant that I didn't have a desire to eat. I wasn't hungry. In fact, I felt queasy when I ate, and I didn't know what was up with that. And the less that I ate, the sicker and more anxious that I felt. So I had to learn how to incorporate more fiber into my diet, because in our today's world, it's really hard to find. One of the ways I did that was definitely chia seeds. And I talked about that the other day. Chia seeds to get the fiber and to get the water that you need inside of you so that everything can work. So when I started to do more fiber, and I tried all the powders and things like that until I got on a good path, until I was able to incorporate it as part of my diet. And then when I added the fiber, surprisingly, amazingly enough, my anxiety started to dial down even more. I thought, wow, okay, this is weird. So the next step is I went to probiotics, and I researched and understood what they were and how they worked and how they were beneficial for me and the best ones to get. And so I went out and I looked for a great probiotic, and I got that on a regular schedule. And I thought, okay, wow, this probiotic is making me feel better too and less anxious. Because remember, my anxiety level was pretty high. I couldn't eat every morning. I woke up every morning sick to my stomach and my skin crawling and not being able to get out of bed, things along those lines. So I had a really high perception of anxiety, and without any seemingly reason for it. So when I got the probiotic on board, then my anxiety dialed down even more. And then the latest thing that I found, which for me has been, I think, one of the last tipping points, is a prebiotic. And the one that I use is called Good Balance. I've got no attachments to it, except it's the only one that I could find that was easy, convenient, within a decent price range. Good Balance was a prebiotic, and I thought, I still have these residual feelings of anxiety when I wake up, even though I'm doing all the good things that I should be doing. And so I'll give the whole prebiotic thing a try. So what's a prebiotic? It's something that fortifies your stomach lining and also encourages good bacteria growth in your body. Now, people might say, but isn't that what a probiotic does? A probiotic gives you the bacteria that you need. A prebiotic nurtures the existing colony and also fortifies your stomach. It gives it a little bit better stomach lining. And when I added that to my repertoire of anxiety dealing skills and tools, when I added a prebiotic, that took away that last little piece for me, so that instead of feeling anxious, even if it was just at a low level on a regular basis, instead of feeling that fight or flight on a regular basis, now I could recognize when it was truly based in an emotion and not just based in poor self-care or poor self-love. So when I could recognize that my anxiety, when the anxiety was actually an emotional issue and when the anxiety was a physical issue, when I could discern that, then I could start working on the emotional pieces, the heart and mind pieces behind my anxiety. So my dentist, as I said the other day, asked me any tips for a mother-in-law or a boss or someone who comes into your life and causes this level of discomfort and anxiety and that knot in your stomach and the nausea. And I said, yeah, with anxiety, instead of always looking at what's mentally wrong with me, what beliefs are getting in the way, what old patterns, what metaphors do they remind me of, instead of diving down that rabbit hole, I started with, wait a second, let's get you in a good space when you interact with your mother-in-law in the first place. Get into a place where your body is already calm. So one of the things that I do when I know I'm walking into an anxious situation or an anxiety-producing whatever, either because somebody wants to talk to you or because it happens every day when you come home, whatever it may be, the first things I do are make sure that I have regular good self-care. As I talked about, the chia seeds, the water, the fiber, the prebiotic, all of those things in place. And then I start adding things into my life that keep me calm. And here are some of my favorite ones. One is chamomile tea. So I hated chamomile tea for a long time because I hated the taste of it. But when I dialed my anxiety down enough that I could actually feel what was going on in my life and not just this knot in my stomach, I realized that chamomile tea did an amazing job at calming me down. So when you're going to be walking into a situation that's familiar, you want to do things that get you into the most balanced, grounded place you can be. And so a cup of chamomile tea does a wonderful job at that. It just smooths out the edges. The next thing that I tell people to add into their repertoire, add into their diet for the day, is GABA. GABA is a neurotransmitter, and it was passed on to me from a functional medicine doctor that I was working with. And they said GABA kind of just wraps you in bubble wrap. And I've got a good friend of mine who's using it and telling all of her friends to use it because she's going through a divorce right now and a highly anxious time. And so she's swearing by the GABA on how it gives her just a little bit of a breathing room to deal with her soon-to-be ex-husband. So I suggest to people, try out GABA, and add that to your repertoire. Good morning, Lisa. I'm so glad you're here with us today. The next thing that I talk to people about is valerian root. Now, valerian root is the foundation or where Valium comes from. And so it's a much gentler version. It's a much more, it works much better with your body. In fact, it's easy to grow. It's easy to get in herb form, and you can make valerian root tea if you'd like. And you can add it to your chamomile if you need, a little bit more powerful of a punch. So valerian root calms you down. It blocks those signals. The other thing that I use on the body-mind level is a little bit of caffeine. We all know that caffeine revs you up. Great, especially in larger amounts. But what caffeine also does is it blocks nervous system signals. So when you have just a little bit of caffeine, it helps block that feeling of anxiety. If you drink too much, of course, it'll make you feel nervous and more anxious. But if you do just a little bit, I use a little coffee candy, or I'll use green tea or white tea, something that's low in caffeine, so that it's just enough to block those nervous system signals. So when I look at anxiety, I actually look at physical things that I can do to not only boost my tolerance to what's going on around me, but also purposely dial me down when I'm going into an anxious situation. So here's the cool thing. So once you do, the self-care pieces, once you do the calming environmental sort of supplements, once you do those things, and it gets you into a good space, it gets you into a space where you feel more grounded. You've surrounded your environment with colors you like and textures and things that really fill you and fill your well, so you're at your peak. When you're in a good space, the energy you bring to a relationship starts to shape the relationship. So if you come home and you walk in the door and you're anxious, and let's say your mother-in-law lives with you, you are primed to feel even more anxious, and she will sense your anxiety and it will trigger her. There was this great research out there about anger. And they said people who were chronically angry or felt angry on a regular basis were more attacked by random strangers, were attacked more often by random strangers than other people were. And the reason behind this is our cells have got receptors for our emotions, for feelings that we release. So if we're feeling anxious, our body's releasing these anxiety chemicals, and our cells have cell receptors for those. So in the next generation of cells, when they duplicate, they will have more cell receptors for anxiety and less cell receptors for peace and happiness and joy. So what does this have to do with your mother-in-law? Well, the way that that your emotion chemical finds the correct receptor is that both the chemical flutters at a wavelength and the receptor flutters at a wavelength, and they sort of tractor beam each other in until the chemical can find the right receptor. So how far does that vibration actually travel? They've done studies where they can measure the vibration of your emotions at least a few feet in the body. And that's one of the reasons that people can see auras or things around people's chakras, because we're actually giving off wavelengths of how we feel. And if we're in relationship or nearby somebody else, then their cells will pick up how we feel, and it will trigger their emotion. In the healing world, one of the things they talk about is the healer being in a good space regularly, in their life, does a large amount of the healing. Because when you get into somebody's space, and if you've got a lot of joy or peace or happiness coming off of you, it's going to trigger that in the other person. And we all know that joy and peace and happiness are great for pain. They're great for smoothing out the edges, for blocking nervous system signals. So when I can trigger somebody else to be into a healing, loving state. So when you've done all of these things to feel less anxious and to feel more grounded and balanced, to walk in nature, let's say, or connection with someone that you like, or listening to good music, when you walk in the door, your vibration is going to affect everybody else around you, including your mother-in-law. It's going to subtly influence people into a positive direction without you even needing to say a word. There was a healer I knew once, and she had a goal in life. And her goal was, as soon as she walked into a room, to be able to heal people. And when I first heard that, I thought, really? That's pretty arrogant, don't you think? That's pretty delusional, don't you think? But as I kept learning about these things and learning about cell receptors and learning about how we affect other people, when I started to learn that, I said, that's true. That's possible, and we're doing it all the time. We're either influencing, even if it's just on a small way, the people around us to feel more sick, or the people around us to feel better, to feel more peaceful. So when you're in a good space and you walk in, because you've done all the things you need to do, then your peaceful attitude triggers in a positive way, influences in a positive way the people who are around you, including the people who have anxiety issues of their own, which your mother-in-law might. Since we're talking about mother-in-laws today, everybody's got their own issues they're working through. And so if you feel anxious, it's going to trigger somebody else's anxiety too. And then the spiral happens. You spiral down. My anxiety triggers your anxiety, which triggers my anxiety. And it just goes downhill until we're walking on eggshells, until we're angry or sarcastic, or we're repressing it and it's making us sick. Many women pretend to be okay with things, pretend that they're happy and peaceful and balanced, but they're repressing it and they're still giving off that vibration. Because remember, no matter how hard you try to hide how you feel, your body is still going to tell people what's going on. It's a little scary. So if you're going to change and really influence, if you want your happy attitude or peaceful attitude or attitude of gratitude to make an impact on your world, you have to do a lot of it on a physical level. It can't just be what you're projecting. It can't just be the face you decided to show. Because if you don't, people will still feel that you're anxious. And it will still start that whole cycle, no matter how happy you look or how happy you feel. Now, some people won't make that connection. They'll just wonder why they feel a certain way around you. Other people will. They'll know that, wow, why does she make me feel anxious? And when I was younger and I had so many anxiety issues, I did that to people a lot. People avoided me because they could sense that no matter how happy I looked, that something was a little bit off. Now, the sad thing about the universe or reality is that what we send out there is what we get back. And so because I was anxious, because I was uptight and high-strung and in a sense of fight or flight, that's what I got back at me. I got other people's anxiety coming at me, and I got other people's issues coming at me. And so I would spiral down myself because it just compounded it. The harder I tried to do well, the more stressed out I was, the more everybody could feel it, and the worse my relationships got, the worse my interactions got. So it was only when I started to feel better that my relationships with people got better, because now they could sense or feel that I was somebody that they enjoyed being around, that they liked to talk to, who was easygoing, who didn't have to be completely focused on what I was feeling or sensing or going through in my life. I had the ability to be present to somebody else. So let's say you walk in the door, you've done all the good things that you needed to do, and here's the situation you're in. So your mother-in-law wants to be heard, wants to be understood, wants to be accepted and loved, just like you do, just like everybody does. And when you're in a grounded, good space, when you're energized and peaceful and calm, then you can give the people you love what they need in order to be in a good space. So I had a mentor, and one of the things she talked about was you had to fill your own well first. So when I got in a good space, then I was able to be present for other people. It's one of the reasons that I'm good at what I do, is because when I'm working, I have the ability to be completely present with someone. I'm not distracted by my felt sense or how I feel. I'm not distracted by my mind going into an obsessive pattern or trying to problem solve my own stuff, which is where a lot of people are at because they don't feel good. I'm able to be present. I'm able to listen. I'm able to care. I'm able to help people get the things that they need. Now, I don't do this for everybody. I don't go out of my way to be nurturing and give everything that I have to everybody else. I stick with the rule of thumb of giving from my well. And I pick and choose who I'll go that extra mile for. So let's say it's your mother-in-law. You want to go the extra mile for that relationship because that could really and truly be to your benefit. If you can help someone who is a big influence on your life be in a better space and feel better, if you can help them do that, then your life will be so much better. So I do it mainly in my practice. I'll go that extra mile, and with the people that have a big influence on my life, like my spouse or my best friends or my mother-in-law, my extended family, or my own family, my parents. So I'm able to be present to them. Now, I'll tell you how I know this and how it works in action. And although, I get along great with my mother-in-law, I didn't always get along really well with my family. My father would trigger a lot of anxiety in me, a ton of anxiety. And so I'd only see him on holidays if I could. My parents were, still together. They weren't divorced. But I'd only see him on holidays. I'd only see him when I had to because it was so anxiety producing for me. It was so hard. It would dial it up. So I'd keep the contact to a minimum. When I got myself into a good place, into a physically good place, and when I was fortified and I was calm and grounded, I could start seeing my family a lot more often. In fact, now our family goes out for breakfast every Sunday. So every Sunday I make a 45 to 60-minute drive to go see my parents and have breakfast with them, which to me is, I would have never imagined that a few years ago. I would have never been able to even do that. It would have been way too stress-producing for me. And so in my journey, in my path of dialing down my anxiety, I've been able to make all of my relationships so much better. Because now I can look at my dad as a human being and not as someone who's scary or makes me feel sick to my stomach. I can look at him and love him and be present for him. And it's those connections and it's our ability to help the people that we love get the things that they need that really started to blossom that relationship. So whether it's your mother-in-law, your boss, or your parent, or your kid, whatever it may be, when you can go that extra mile for them, their lives start to change too. And when their life changes, to the positive, your life gets better, and your life gets better, and their life gets better. And it's like building blocks. It builds on all of them. So now I'm better able to take care of my parents, and that relationship is just so much nicer because I can handle going to breakfast with them every Sunday, and I can handle, calling them on the phone and seeing how they're doing because it's not freaking me out. It's not stressing me out like it did for so many years in my life. And that is wonderful to know that I'm healing those relationships with my family and I'm helping my family heal because they had all sorts of physical issues from their anxiety and their worries about the world and the problems that they have. And so when they feel better, their body feels better too. It's this constant, good morning, Michael, I'm so glad you're here. It's this constant spiraling up. And it all started with something, as I said, as simple as water and fiber, a probiotic and a prebiotic, and then the chamomile tea and the GABA and the valerian root and all of these things. Now, I don't use everything all at the same time. What I do is I put them in my toolkit so that nothing gets overused and my body doesn't become numb to it. The more tools that I have to be present to my life and to the people that I love, the more tools I have to help me with that, the better off that I am and the better healer that I am. Because now I know from the ground up how you can or how it's possible. And I'm not saying every relationship can because some are just crazy making. The other person isn't ready for that relationship and you need to take care of yourself, maybe love them from a distance. But it's very possible to start to change and heal the relationships in your life that really matter to you, that can really help you on your journey. It's very possible, but it starts with the simple things of self-care and then understanding how our nervous system works. One of my favorite ways to stay grounded is to get body work done and pleasurable touch. So I have to tell you that because, of course, I'm a shiatsu massage therapist. So surprisingly, I didn't mention that before. It's because for me, I didn't get regular massages because I had people in my life that gave me a lot of really good, healthy, nurturing touch. But I can't overemphasize the power that touch has in order to calm down the nervous system. So when I interact with people that I love, I make sure that I touch them often. And then also in my practice, clearly I touch people as well. And those things help those people feel less anxious and feel better too. And then it's a whole big positive experience. You know, for the longest time I thought I had to do everything by myself. I had to do it alone because, you know, I'd never be able to find anybody to collaborate with, to create a life with. When I was in a good space and I led the energy, when I led the direction that the relationship would go by being happy and balanced and grounded, when I would walk into a relationship and I would lead that, then everybody benefited. Everybody started to be healthier and happier, and we could synergistically work together. It was no longer me against everybody else, or me having to make everything happen, or protect people from things. I wasn't in that space anymore. Now, we can have that back and forth relationship, how I think life is meant to be. We're not meant to do these things alone. So when you're in a good space, you attract other good people and you attract the community that you've probably always wanted. That synergistic, positive, nurturing, loving, connective, intimate relationship. So, you know, it's been a long road, but these are the tools that I've used to really get closer to the people that I love, to dial down the anxiety on a regular basis, to be able to understand myself what issues or what true emotional issues that I have that I'm working with, and evolve and succeed and grow in the many areas that I have, because now I'm able to attract the things that I want in my life because I'm physically giving off vibrations. I'm physically and emotionally drawing these things into my life. So there you have it in a nutshell. Prebiotics and handling your mother-in-law or boss or whoever it may be. There's a definite connection, and I hope you start gathering things into your toolbox too, because the more tools you have, the better off you are and the less dependent you are on one thing in order to feel better. So that's it for today. I'll see you tomorrow morning again, 8:15. I do this Monday through Friday, Conversations with the Soul. And if you like replays or daily inspiration, sign up for our email list at inspiremassage.com. And then every so often I throw out products and tools and things that I sell or that I joint venture with people on, or people that I really believe in what they do. I pass it on to help us all move in this great direction. So just keep your eyes open for all the neat things we're going to do. You're welcome, Kathy, and I'm so glad that this was helpful today. Those are some of my best tools, and I'll dive deeper into some of them later on. We'll pick them apart on other episodes so that you can get a really good understanding of how they affect us. So I hope you have a great rest of your day, and ciao from Northern Illinois. Bye.